Good evening. The Rio Rancho Board of Education meeting for Monday, September 28th, 2020 is now called to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Vice President Jeffrey Morgan will present. And please mute your microphones for everyone else.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Vice President Morgan. Jane, can you take a roll call for us?
I will. Madam President Galbraith.
Present.
Vice President Morgan.
Present.
Secretary Scott.
Present.
Board Member Cullen.
Present.
Board Member Coleman.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. We have a quorum present tonight. We'd like to welcome everyone out to our meeting tonight, especially those who are viewing from YouTube tonight. We also like to welcome all of our district officers who are here and who will be presenting tonight. Tonight we'll start off our meeting with some introductory comments by the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. V. Sue Cleveland. Dr. Cleveland.
Good afternoon. Okay. Next slide, please. Just want to show we have been in constant communication with state officials, with the public ed department. Also have had meetings with the Legislative Finance Committee, executive director and assistant director or deputy director, and also with the LESC. And so we continue to talk a lot about the implementation, what's going well, where there are areas where we need to have some changes, and the whole issue of what needs to be done. Much of the core of this discussion is with the public ed department, has to do with compliance and local control. And if I can do this, I'm not even being able to find it. It's going to share my screen, but hold on. It's okay. And I can also send you a list of all of the things that we have been required to do since the very 1st of September. And it's an extremely lengthy number of things to do. And so continuing the conversation about what is the information that absolutely is needed. Can there be any relief? We've had a lot of requests for reports and surveys and so forth, and a really short turnaround time for getting some of those things back. We also continue to work on our boundaries and processes, and the conversation really focuses around what is mine, what is yours, and what is ours together. And it's some of those areas are still very vague, and there's still a lot of discussion about what is within the local district's prerogative and what is strictly within the state's prerogative. As you know, there was a new toolkit that was distributed. There were some changes and some minor adjustments. The good news for Rio Rancho Public Schools is that it required very little change on our part. So it didn't make a great deal of difference to us. We have continued to discuss with them the reentry plan and received a request today to send them the information in terms of how we had determined what would be the level of air filtration filters, what was that looking like for every single building, where they ordered, and what was the estimated time of arrival. And so facilities department pulled that together in one day and was able to get that information up. But that's kind of the ongoing conversation about things that need to be done and turnaround. And the new assurances have to be signed and sent to the public ed department And this issue of filters is probably part of that discussion, as because we, if you recall, had sent an addendum that said that we didn't have all the filters in place, but we were committed not only to getting the new filters and getting them installed, but going to the highest level that the equipment would take. And so Melody's going to speak a little bit about that a little bit later in one of the reports. So I'll just kind of move on from that. But we do have a new set of assurances that have to be signed. Next slide, please. Again, in the meetings, there's just some common themes that are shared with PED and certainly with LFC, who certainly oversees the budget work of the New Mexico legislature, the LESC, which is generally programmatically oriented. As I shared with the board in the board report, it's kind of backwards right now. Seems like LESC is asking budget questions and LFC is asking program questions, but the two are so intertwined that it's, you know, they overlap in so many different ways. The biggest concerns, not only for Rio Rancho, but for many other districts, is the state equalization guarantee. Because we're down about 800 students. Next year is going to be tough if we're funded on prior year funding. And so I think the exact number was 759, but it's for all practical purposes about 800. Also transportation, we're not carrying the same number of children on a school bus as we have in years past, but the costs are pretty much the same. So that we're paying drivers, we have to pay for fuel, we have to pay for maintenance. And while sometimes there's fewer stops, there are also longer routes. So it's all pretty much, it's the same cost. And as in the past, we're short. We're probably short about $1 million in terms of state-funded transportation. So we've stressed that, and also instructional materials. We are short in terms of instructional materials. And as you well know, having been one of the Yazzie Martinez litigant districts, that all three of those were to continue to be monitored by the courts under the Yazzie Martinez decision. So that's why we think it's really important the state takes a look at those areas, because they were part of the findings. The district also is in need of financial assistance to cover the costs in technology and food service and personal protective equipment. All of those costs went up significantly. We did get some CARES money, but of course, that didn't cover all of it, especially after it was reduced after the special session. The public ed department did inform districts that the state had stepped up and had made a considerable investment in PPE. And our staff attended a meeting last week on how to order. In discussing that a little bit more, wanting to know a little bit more how that came about, it's very interesting. It didn't really come about the way most of us had originally thought. This actually came from Homeland Security. And so they're the ones that made the investment and gave it to the state. So for the additional equipment that is coming, masks, N95 masks, some additional things for our highest needs teachers, and it's really the students that are higher need, and the teachers who also have the need for better equipment. So we thank Homeland Security for that. We have been told that some of the PPE will be at the higher level grades. It will be N95s. There will be some additional heavier duty coverings, and for that we're very, very pleased, very, very grateful. I think we jumped 2 slides. Okay. We have a resolution that we brought to the board at the special meeting for action this evening. And asking for the state to reconsider and allow us to bring some of our at-risk students, especially at the secondary level, back under the same parameters, under the same guidelines as we did for children with disabilities K through 12. And so there's some students that we think desperately need to be back in school, really need that extra support. And we hope that the state will reconsider and allow us to bring those at-risk students back under the same guidelines. So small groups and, not every day, but having regular meetings and regular opportunities connect with these students. I want to stress these are students who are not students with disabilities, but students who are at risk for whatever reason. I won't go into a lot of detail, just to say that districts are really struggling with the surveillance testing. We need, we're going to have to continue to have that conversation with the state of New Mexico and exactly how they would like us to proceed with some of the challenges that we are facing. Many of the districts, including Rio Rancho, are really concerned about contact tracing. We think that's very important, equally important, if not more so, than the surveillance testing. And we simply don't have the staff to do contact tracing as thoroughly as needed. So the call is saying, okay, well, who have they all been in contact with, and who have they talked to, and who have they been with, and with the family, and so we really don't have the staff for that. So we're doing the very, very best job we can do, but we really hope that the state will pick up more of the responsibility for contact tracing rather than school districts, because you really should be trained to do that, and the whole issue of time and time away from other things that teachers and staff should be doing. So we hope that they will consider that. My understanding is just there's a shortage of people willing to do that job, and a lot of people don't realize they don't actually have to come in contact with people. Most of that work is done on the telephones, calling people, and so we hope that they are able to recruit more folks to contact tracing and put more resources there. There is an issue with attendance in most districts across the state, a need for flexibility. It's not working as well as it does when you're in a regular school environment. And so we are working on that. Board Member Cullen brought that issue to our attention, and I shared with her that we have a team that is working on that, and hopefully we'll have some information back in a couple of weeks. But there are some changes that are needed at the state level in terms of how that's being worked, and it's just very difficult in the kind of environment that we're working with right now. So we hope that there'll be some flexibility in terms of attendance, and it's just in the past teachers took attendance, and so it's pretty easy to take attendance. When you push the burden to the student and the family, sometimes that's going to get done and sometimes it's not. And so it's just a different process and procedure people are not really used to. And it has really shifted the responsibility, not to the school, but to the family. We talk a lot about flexibility and how important flexibility is. I think that sometimes people think that flexibility means being okay with reworking. And so we're redoing things over, multiple times. And Edward Stimming, the father of the Baldrige criteria, talked about reworking is a waste of time. It's the single greatest waste of time. So needing to know what it is we want to have done and then doing it, but not having to redo it is just really frustrating when time is so precious. So flexibility is we're asking to have a little more opportunity to fit the requirements into the situations that exist in each school district. Reworking is something that we hope that we can do a little less of. And then the filters are going to be addressed a little bit later, and so I'm not going to comment on that. In terms of agility and flexibility, there are 89 different districts and there are 89 different stories. Everyone is having different kinds of challenges. And so being able to have some flexibility is really desperately needed for us to meet each of the students' needs in all of our districts. And give you one example. In the past, administration of the ACT and SAT really was a fairly smooth process. Well, it isn't anymore. And so we're having to get people agree to come in and test on a Saturday, and teachers willing to come in and do that. And they have to be socially distanced, and there can only be so many students in a room, has to be spread out over a very large area. And so that has been quite a challenge, because we have a lot of people who don't want to come in on the weekend. They have other commitments, other challenges. And so it's just a small example of how things are just a little bit different. You have to think a little bit differently. What we have found across the state right now in terms of extended year is a very large number of districts are doing extended year. And you remember that the board approved extending the school year this year, and we've amended our calendar, and that calendar is on the website. We're not finding that many districts want to do K-5 plus, and they don't want to do it because the parents and the students and staff have not been supportive of it. And when we did our survey, we did not have a positive response at all from any group in doing K-5 plus. Parents didn't want to do it, students didn't want to do it, staff didn't want to do it. And so that's what we're finding in most districts across the state. And then the other factor is that as tight as money is, it's hard to pay for an extra month when you're not able to pay for the basics in the original 9 months. And so I really would prefer that money to go back to filling the holes this year rather than adding on in the summer, especially when we don't have a lot of support for it. And again, it is, we need the money for this year, not only this year, but also for next year as well. Sorry, I see a typo there. All right, next slide, please. We did begin our surveillance testing this past week. I want to, again, thank Sandoval County for a job well done. They got this well organized. It was very efficiently administered. And it just could not have run more smoothly. So they sent a note of thanks to the county, sent some information to other organizations, just simply thanking the county for stepping up and making this happen for us. Initially, we thought we were going to have to send people to the fairgrounds in Albuquerque for the testing, and that would have been quite a day trip. And we're glad that we were able to do it here behind the courthouse here in Sandoval County. The purpose, a lot of people ask, why are we doing this? Why is this important? What's the why behind surveillance testing? And the thinking behind it is to keep the staff safe and students as well by identifying asymptomatic staff. In other words, the staff that are not experiencing any symptoms that are working, and then to quarantine them before they continue to spread COVID-19 through the school. So that is the thinking behind the state's requirement. This is a requirement. This is not optional. This was not something Rio Rancho went out and did on its own. It is required by the Public Education Department and by the Department of Health. And staff are being notified that they've been selected and need to submit their testing results to the district when they are received. We have had some people not do it that were in the first pool, and that's certainly going to be an issue that is going to have to be addressed fairly soon. All right, next page. This is the latest information that we have related to staff, students, and family travel. We continue to get calls and people asking, well, if I leave, then, what happens? And so this isn't a good picture right now. And so if you do leave and you do travel, whether you're staff or student, you will have to quarantine if you have traveled to any of these states. So we're encouraging people not to travel over fall break if you can help it. But if you do, then you need to notify us and you need to quarantine for the 14 days. And we're still in all the quarantine rules still apply. And again, I would check it. It just changes all the time. I had a map up here that was 5 days ago, and Beth found the one that had just come out, and that's it looks quite different. There are significantly more red states than there were with the last travel map. As you know, you were all notified there were 2 confirmed cases this past week, one at Sandia Vista and the other at Puesto del Sol. There's some things we've learned in this process. We did receive the support that we needed from the Department of Health, and we thank them for that. They were responsive. They helped us through the process, and I think it's really important that everyone knows that they make many of the key decisions. We did a debrief Friday afternoon with the school-based, the principals and district-based staff to see what it was we could do better, how we could improve the process, and what had we learned. And things worked very well, but there were some areas where we're going to do things a little differently. And what we did learn is that we had one process for staff and another process for students, and they didn't look really all that much alike. There were a lot of changes. So we kind of moved to streamline that and have one single process for both students and for both staff. So there's one process if you suspect that you might have it, and then there is an actual form once a case is confirmed that is the form we use for both students and for staff. Sorry, my allergies are bothering me, but I was COVID tested, and you need to know I am COVID free. So you do not need to worry about that. And the other group I would like to just really thank are the parents. And they were just so cooperative as we worked through this process, whether it was their child or whether it was the other children in the classroom. I just can't thank them enough for stepping up and being cooperative and helping us with that. So we thank them a lot, and everybody was cooperative. Next slide. There's a couple of things too that we learned that's really important. And if your child or a staff member is tested because they are demonstrating symptoms or they've been in close contact with someone who does have COVID, then they have to stay home until the results come back. You can't come back to school or to work and then get the results. So that's something maybe we haven't emphasized enough, and we're really trying to send that message out again. Again, the Department of Health determines who is quarantined. The Department of Health determines what degree of closure is needed, whether it's a classroom or a wing or a whole school. They make that decision. And honestly, I'm really glad they do, because I think, they are the experts in that area. We are not, and really glad they make that decision. And then last, they set the date when those who are quarantined can return to campus. That is not something that we can do. And I think the intent of that is to have it consistent across the state and to be sure that we have adhered to all those timelines. All right, next slide. So, where do we go from here? Our next steps. We certainly continue to live and learn as we go through this rather interesting journey. Districts, including Rio Rancho, we continue to have regular dialogue with the state agencies, giving them feedback on how it's going and making recommendations if we think there's some areas that need to be changed. We are on top of the attendance. We've got a team that's working on that. We have been told, this is exact quote, "This is school and attendance is required." So we have to show that students are in school, and that is required by the state. We hope maybe we could get a less cumbersome process, and that's something that we're working on. And I think now is the beginning of the time that the board might want to start thinking about our conversations with both our state and national delegation in terms of legislation, in terms of things that we need, both in terms of our state, but also national, the relief that schools need to have. And we were talking with the LFC, and they were talking about their 2-year plans and 5-year plans, and I said a little bit irreverently, I said, no, what we really need right now is a Marshall Plan for schools. And if you remember the Marshall Plan, was the plan after World War II for people to get back, for the countries to get back on their feet. Well, we kind of need the same thing. We need to get back on our feet before we look at new plans and new initiatives. And, we need to recover a little bit before we start out on all these new possibilities. And some of them are really good things, but we've got to dig ourselves out of that well first. So we'll begin to have our conversation with our delegations and bring that information to the board and give them the board an opportunity to talk with our delegation or to send letters to Washington with regards to your priorities. We keep getting calls about the calendar. Yes, we have extended year. The calendar was approved by the board, and that calendar is on the website. So really encourage people to look at that if you want to know when school ends and the dates for this school year. And then, we've got next steps are just to continue to review and make modifications in our instructional program and continue with our efforts for professional development. And ongoing dialogue with staff, students, and parents is really important. Next slide. So one of the things we are getting ready to do, we did have a presentation by Lawana Coleman, Happy Miller, and Suzanne Wynn, and it was a proposal that they brought to Cabinet this afternoon. And the goal is to have a survey that will go out to all three of those groups to assess where we are. Sometimes it's really hard to know how everybody's feeling. We hear from some folks who are very vocal and who are very forthcoming in terms of their recommendations and ideas, but we want to be sure we have heard from everyone. And so the goal is to have this survey pretty closely aligned to our reentry plan, the same basic areas. And so we will be asking the reentry chairpersons to be the ones to take a leadership role in this effort. And as I said before, we hope to administer it to everyone. And we hope to get that survey out within the next couple of weeks and definitely before the end of the 9 weeks. So we will have that information as we look to finishing out this year. And we really hope people will step forward just like they did last time. We had a significant number of people who did participate in giving us their feedback. And we very much want and value that. So that will be coming up fairly soon to ensure that we have that dialogue and that everyone who wants to share their information or ideas or opinions has a venue to do so. Okay. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those, or I will turn it back to President Galbraith.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. And we'll just run through the board real quick and see if there's any questions. Wynn Coleman, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Cleveland, I know you mentioned that we're down about 800 students. Have you been able to, could you share maybe where you're seeing that as far as grade levels?
We have more in elementary, but we'll bring you a detailed report back. But we have more in elementary. We lost more children at that level than any other. I don't have those numbers in front of me. They've been given to me, but I just simply don't have them here and don't know them by heart. But I do know that there were more elementary children than there were secondary.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious about
that.
But
there are a lot of losses at all three levels. It's certainly not. We have the fewest at high school. And if you think logically about that, it's probably more related to the fact that they're close to graduation and they're in the credit, in the credit bearing years. And so you don't come, you're going to lose those credits. So we have a much smaller number in the high schools.
Okay.
I'll be glad to get you the specific numbers though on that.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
All right, thank you. Board member or Secretary Scott.
Yes, I have a question along the same lines. Do we have a sense that the students are going somewhere else, or are they just not going to school?
We have we know when they go to another school or school district, because there has to be a request of records to enroll. So we know those that have gone to other schools. We know that some we have been able to find through the state program. For each child that we don't have an accounting for, an account is created for them. And we're working with this group called Engage at no cost to the school district. They're helping us try to find those. We do know that a lot from the state that homeschool enrollment is up significantly, but homeschool information is not available to public schools. That's considered private information. They don't share that with us. But they have told us that the numbers are up and many are in homeschools. So we don't know the exact numbers, and some we still, Secretary Scott, there's some children we don't know where they are. And we don't know if they have left the state. We have, I know that some of the other districts on the border of Texas, whether it's El Paso or the eastern border, have reported large numbers of children have moved over across the border to go to school. And so they don't report, Texas doesn't report that back to us, but they have confirmed that they have families who have crossed the border to be able to go to school. So I think it's a combination of lots of different things. And we know that some of our students have moved to other states to live with other relatives and go to school. So all over the place is the answer. It's a combination of a lot of different things.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland.
The ones I'm most concerned about are those that we just don't know where they are, and the concern that they might not be getting any services at all. And so, those are the ones that we are trying to locate every single student, and our principals have made a lot of effort to try to make contact with those families, and we'll continue to work on that.
Thank you. That was my concern as well, that children just were falling through the cracks.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid concern. I think that's happening in some cases.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Scott. Vice President Morgan?
Yeah, Dr. Cleveland, if you don't mind, can you give us more updates on the cases that was discovered? I know on an email I think you sent out that they came in and cleaned a couple of classrooms. Is there any more information out there that needs to be shared that we may not be privy of or not aware of at this time?
What we are allowed to share and we sent to the board was the school and the how many students were quarantined and the what's happening to the building at large. So we have shared that information. We are not allowed to give out individual students' names. So in both cases, it was a single classroom, and there was approximately 14 children in each classroom that had to be quarantined. And I know for one school, there were 5 adults that also had to be quarantined that had come into contact with that child. So the teacher, the nurse, if the nurse had the student in the care room, the security guard that maybe walked the child to the car. And so it's only those that came into close contact. Again, we don't make that call. The Department of Health makes that call, and they determine whether it was just a classroom and that child had not been out of that classroom and into contact with, other children in other settings. If that had been more than that, then they could have shut down an entire wing. And if you have a very large outbreak, then they have the potential to shut down the school. We've been only 2 classrooms, and it's been very limited so far.
Oh, good news. Thank you so much. Just wanted to get an update on that. I thought for sure that they may have come in and asked us to close down, like you said, a wing or the whole school. I was a little concerned about that, but thank you so much.
Yeah. Now, I can assure the board that anyone who comes into close contact with that child will be quarantined, whether it's other students or whether it's staff. And Um, and again, we work very closely with the Department of Health, and they make the final call as to how many people have to remain home. And as I said in the presentation, they also tell us when they can come back. So even if you're feeling pretty good and you want to come back, you can't come back until the state quarantine date is achieved.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Morgan. And Catherine Collin.
Hi. Yes, Dr. Cleveland, do we have a date yet for our meeting with our legislators? So that I know we're going to have to discuss of what we want to present with them, and with a lot of this new information coming up, I think that we need to have a workshop before then.
I agree, and we have not. We said we wait until October, and October should be further away instead of a couple of days, but it's here. So we will start working immediately with Chris on getting that date set up, and we'll come back and give you some options on dates if we can give you some options, unless the legislators only give us one date. But we will get that set up right away, and we are aware that we need to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Collin. I have one last question, Dr. Cleveland, and I'm sure that this was presented probably. I just want to double check. Our nurses in those care rooms, they're using the N95 masks. Is that correct? When those kids
our
come in?
nurses have N95 masks.
Perfect.
And
Okay.
other protective gear. But some other of our employees who need it do not. And so that's why we're very glad that we're getting these additional medical grade masks, and that they should be coming fairly soon. So, but yes, our nurses definitely do have not only the masks, but the paper coverings as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? I'm just kind of looking at the board real quick. I think we're good. Thank you, Dr. Cleveland, for those opening comments. It's very helpful to us as a board for you to give those, so we really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to item E, to approve the prioritized agenda and proposed time allocations. One on that, I would like to recommend on item F under business, that policy 407, go from, currently it's listed as a second reading with an action. I would like us to just go to a first reading on that, obviously with no action, just because there's quite a bit of new information on that. And then, Dr. Cleveland, is there any recommendations that you have?
I would like to pull D. It has been brought to my attention that there are still some concerns and questions on that. And so what I would like to do is send some information out to the board. We'll send it probably with the superintendent's report. And then we will bring that back to the finance committee. As you know, we have a finance committee scheduled before the next board meeting. We'll take it through the finance committee and bring it back at the next regularly scheduled meeting. So that is my recommendation.
Okay, so that was, make sure that was item D, right? The RFP
Yes.
that we're recommending pulling off. Okay. Board questions or comments or any other recommendations for change on that?
Madam President, which one were you wanting to change?
So my item is item F, which is policy 407. And yeah, there's just been a lot of, there's a quite a big change in there. And I just think it might be better for us to have a little bit more time to read over that tonight. And there might be some more additional changes before we take it to action.
Okay, Madam Chairman, I would like to move for approval of the prioritized agenda and the proposed time allocations, with the exception of D and F.
Okay. Thank you. And F being just changing from a second reading to a first reading. Perfect.
That's correct.
Okay.
This is Board Member Jeff Morgan. I second that motion.
Okay. Jane, can you take a roll call vote on this?
Yes, I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman,
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. We'll now move on to our public comment. It is a change. We only received 2 public comments for this meeting. So we received one of our public comment comes from Shannon Cassidy, and her subject about the calendar being approved, that spring calendar that we just talked about being approved. Our other public comment comes from Valerie Kilpack. She had some concerns regarding the cleaning that's happening in our schools now that we're back in-person learning. Both those comments have been sent to every member of the board and have been read, and also sent to the district staff involved in those areas. Thank you for sending public comment. Any who wish to give us public comment, please go to our website, rrps.net. And if you go to district and then click on the school board, you'll find a link where you can give public comment. So thank you all for giving us public comment. Okay. Item G, we do not have anything on the consent agenda today that needs to be voted on. So we'll pass through that. And now moving on to reports. Our first report is on COVID-19 related building report, and that will be by Melanie Archibek, our Executive Director of Facilities.
Good evening, Madam President Galbraith, members of the board, and Dr. Cleveland. So I was asked to kind of go over the HVAC COVID measures that we have here at the district. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing on the right side of your screen is the requirements or the parameters from the new New Mexico PED toolkit that was dated September 17th. And there are 2 main items that they are asking the criteria that we hit. So I'll go over them one by one. The first one is that we have a written protocol on inspecting, repairing, and providing maintenance on our ventilation systems. So what you're seeing on the left of the screen is actually our preventative maintenance schedule that is for every single school. And so the technicians will go through each of those items, check everything. If there is an issue or they notice there's a problem, they'll write a work order and they will then correct it. But that meets the first item from the state. Next slide, please. So the next one is the filtration levels, so the MERV ratings. I'm going to read through this because there's some key points here. It shall be maximized for equipment capabilities. MERV 13 filters shall be used in HVAC systems that are compatible with that type of filter. Systems that are not compatible with the MERV 13 filter shall use the filter with the highest MERV rating compatible with the system. And so the district, throughout the entire district, with the exception of Cleveland, uses MERV 8. And I should say Shining Stars Preschool and Joe Harris are MERV 13 as well. But at all the other schools, we use MERV 8. Our concern was as you go up in filter size, it can trap smaller particulates, which is fantastic. But what it also does is it restricts the airflow to the units. And that becomes an issue if the actual HVAC system wasn't designed to handle a MERV 13. And then on top of that, if you think of the age of our systems. So that was our concern. The graph that you're seeing there is at one point we were asked to put a minimum 9, MERV 9 in all of our systems. And so the chart is showing you the difference between a MERV 8 and a MERV 10. So you can see it's very minimal in terms of the particulates that it would trap. Next slide, please. So what we did to try and make sure that we were doing our due diligence and meeting all the requirements is we hired an engineering firm to recommend the highest MERV rating our units could effectively operate off of. We actually had very surprising results. 3 of our schools are designed to operate on MERV 4 filters. As I mentioned earlier, we're operating off of MERV 8. This explains a lot of recurring maintenance issues we were having. So at those particular schools, we were seeing motors and compressors blow at an unprecedented level that we were having to replace. So this answered the problem that we kept seeing. Going up at a higher level, of course, it's going to amplify that and it'll create more issues for us. Of all the elementary schools, and the preschool. That's 12 of them. As I mentioned earlier, we have 2 that are actually designed to utilize MERV 13, and those are our 2 new schools. We are going to go through this same process. We actually are. It's due at the end of this week for the secondary. So we're in preparations to do that and then receive quotes next week in order, but I'll come back to that. And one of the things that I want to just kind of highlight again, and I think you guys are all aware of this, is we have a large chunk of our 2019 bond funds assigned to replace HVAC units. And so I just want to make sure that you can see kind of the challenges that we have. We're trying to meet these higher MERV ratings. Next slide, please. So some additional measures that we're doing. So that meets the 2 intents that the PED is asking us. Originally, we had scheduled to change out the air filters 3 times the school year versus 2 times. But because of the increased MERV ratings that we're doing now, we're looking at changing them out every month or month and a half because we're concerned about the restricted airflow. So that is a lot of resources, but it's something that we're prepared to do. But that's why it says modified, because originally our plan, I think that we had presented before, was 3 times the school year. Now with this new information, we're looking at doing it a lot more frequently than we had intended. We do have increased run times. So as I mentioned in the past, we are flushing out the building, running full throttle, 3 hours pre and post occupancy, and we're maintaining our exhaust fans. And so when I say that, we want to make sure that we can clear out the air, bring fresh air in. And again, we do have old systems within the district. And so we just want to make sure everything's operating the best that it can, which is where those preventative maintenance plans really come into effect. In terms of our secondary schools, as I mentioned, the same assessment is happening this week. It's due at the end of the week. We will be obtaining quotes and putting in orders next week, but MERV 13, we're being told, is out January, February timeline. So if we put these orders in, we're looking months down the road, and that's only because everybody is trying to order these. So right now, Cleveland has MERV 13, and that's because it was designed to operate off of MERV 13, but we are having difficulty trying to get those in. I now stand for questions.
Thank you. And we'll start with Jeffrey Morgan.
You know, I don't have a question, but I do want to thank you for getting back to us to what filters was going to be approved. Because I know we talked to Dr. Cleveland about this maybe a couple of meetings ago, and I think we were waiting to hear back from whoever was making that decision on what filters we can use. So thank you so much. I appreciate the follow up on that.
Yes, and I should mention, and I failed to mention, so as I said, we have 3 schools that were designed for MERV 4, and so we've ordered MERV 9 because that was the minimum that we were asked to kind of strive towards. And then the rest of the schools are a combination. So they're a combination of 9, MERV 9, 11, and 13. 13 is pretty minimal. It's 1 unit here or there, but the remaining schools are a combination of all those 3 filter ratings.
Yeah, I think the last time we talked, we just wanted to make sure that whatever filters that the school was going to be able to use, it was approved. That's what the concern was. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks, Vice President Morgan. And you brought up Dr. Cleveland, and I usually like to ask Dr. Cleveland just if she has any additional comments. I'm going to go back to her and then back to the board. Dr. Cleveland, did you want to add anything before we go through the rest of our questions?
No, I think Melanie did a great job with it. As I did share earlier, we did get a request today from the state, 1 day turnaround in terms of what we had done. And I think what they are looking for is to see that we've done what we said we would do. And that's, and the facilities department, Melanie, have done every single thing that they asked us to do. So it was really easy to turn around and say, all of those things have been accomplished. I really want to emphasize the concern that Melanie's raised, that when we do this, we will be putting a strain on our equipment, and we know that. And it means that the other equipment is going to take a really hard beating during that time. Of course, the decision is to do that because we want to keep everybody as safe as possible. But in the long term, that will be a financial issue that the board is going to have to look at, because some of those systems are not going to last as long. And then my last comment, I had asked Melanie, did we have to re-engineer up the newer units that we were buying to accommodate MERV 13 filters? And I don't know, Melanie, if you want to address that, but it did, I think, increase the cost on those units to be able to buy up a little bit higher, or maybe not. So if you want to make any comments on that, add to what I've said. But I think we did have additional costs because we did have to re-engineer up to MERV 13. And that's all I had.
All the new bond projects, we will also be designing it to handle MERV 13, but that, construction isn't expected to start until next summer.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. And then let's go over to Board Member Catherine Cullen.
Thank you, Melanie. So, I know that we definitely need to do this to keep the facilities safe. However, I'm, of course, concerned about the increased costs and, of course, what's going to do long-term for our HVAC system. And so with that, I hope that during Finance Committee, we can bring some numbers of what we're looking at. I mean, these are pretty significant costs of having to change out quite often these filters that I don't think that we were planning as well. And then with these upgrades, because I'm really concerned about those ones that are MERV 4 and then we're having to push it. I think it's going to sound like it's going to really wear on what we have. And those ones that have MERV 4s, are they the ones that are set to be replaced with this bond?
No, there are newer schools.
Yeah, that's concerned. So we're going to be looking at what's going to happen with the longevity on those. And I understand PED's trying to work through this as well. This probably came from their facility. Does this come from PED or facilities?
No, the requirement came from PED.
I'm really concerned that they're kind of pushing this all really quickly, get the information really quickly, and they really don't understand a lot of what the schools have and the capabilities they have across the state, and trying to implement this and to really look at what the long-term consequences this is going to also be on the school systems as well. So thank you very much, Melanie. I appreciate the update.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Cullen. Noreen Scott.
Melanie, I wonder if it's possible to get a chart of what each HVAC unit, which school it goes to for the new ones, because I'm not clear in my mind what schools are getting the new ones, and I'd kind of like to understand that a little better.
The new HVAC systems?
Yeah.
Yes, I can provide a report for the board of the schools that are scheduled for that. Would that work?
Yes, that would be very helpful, just so I'm clear in my own mind.
Okay.
And that's really all. I think you were very smart to get a consultant in, and it sounds like they gave us some very good information. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Scott. Wynn Coleman.
Melanie, thank you for putting together the presentation. Mike Baker, a couple of board meetings ago, talked about how much extra cost the district was going to be putting out when it comes to changing out this whole process. But now, am I understanding correctly, with having to change it once a month now, that cost will even be higher than what he had mentioned?
Yes, it will.
Okay. And just to Board Member Cullen's point, those are numbers that I really think will be very important to have a discussion about in finance. So, and I am concerned about that, and concerned about the length of time that we have to go ahead and wait to get some of the systems up to speed. And so, but you and I have kind of talked about that before, so in the past. But thank you for presenting this. So
you're welcome.
Okay, thank you so much, Board Member Coleman, and thank you, Melanie. Thank you for this presentation. It's helpful, and it's still a work in progress, and we'll figure it out, and then it'll change. But we appreciate all the work that you've been putting in to get this done and keep our families safe. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
President Galbraith, could I make
Yes,
just
please.
one last comment? Something that Board Member Cullen said kind of triggered something for me. Yes, in this push to do this very quickly, they forgot to go through the Public School Facilities Group, PSFA. And so had they done that, they know all of these challenges related to school HVACs. And so they were kind of unhappy, and we were told to work with them, and they weren't real excited to come in at the end of this. But that just kind of shows things move so quickly that sometimes even a key player like PSFA wasn't included in the process. So that will be a discussion, I think, long-term for the state capital outlay as they look at, number one, damage to existing equipment and shortened lifespans for HVAC systems across the state. So I did want to just add that one last thought.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. Okay, our next report is on in-person and virtual food services, and this will be presented by Arlene Manzanares, our Executive Director of Finance, and also Mark Willis with Sodexo. There you are, Arlene. I thought, oh no.
Sorry, I almost started to talk and didn't turn my camera on. So good evening, Madam President Galbraith, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. Thank you for this opportunity to update you on the food service program. First of all, you may be wondering why the Executive Director of Finance is talking to you about food service. Well, the Rio Rancho Public School food service contract falls under the Finance Department. And Sodexo has been awarded the food service contract for several years now. Therefore, I'll start off by giving you a brief update of the food service program since the pandemic began. And then I'll turn it over to Flor Granados. She is the food service manager. We had expected Mark to be able to present tonight, but he was unable to attend the meeting. We also had a presentation that we were unable to get to you, so we can send that to you if you'd like later. So I'm pleased to report that during this unprecedented times, Rio Rancho Public School has been able to provide free meals to the children of Rio Rancho. From March through the first week of August, the curbside grab-and-go meals were available at 8 Rio Rancho Public School food distribution sites, which amounted to approximately 12,000 meals a week. Then, with the start of the new school year, the free emergency school meal program came to an end to include the weekend meals. So students not qualifying for the federal free or reduced meal benefits were expected to pay normal breakfast and lunch prices. Thus, the meal count went down to approximately 3,000 meals a week, and we had to change the curbside locations to three sites. At the beginning of September, we received word from PED that USDA approved for all districts to return to the free emergency school meal program. And then the following week, our district moved to the hybrid model. And so at that time, we changed to 5 curbside grab-and-go sites plus our 11 elementary schools. And they began to serve a choice of hot meals at the schools. All the meals were available at both, of course, at the school and curbside 5 days a week. And so we are currently serving approximately 14,000 meals a week. So as you can see, the meal counts are going up. But to report what a normal year would look like, this same week last year, we were serving approximately 54,700 meals. So it's drastically gone down. And with that said, I'll turn it over to Flor Granados to give you some more specifics about our food service program.
Good evening, President Goldberg, Vice President Morgan, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. I'm Flor Granados, I'm the food service manager, and I'm here to present on behalf of Mark Willis an update about the student nutrition program. As Arlene outlined, we've had a meal growth from August to September. It's about 78.6% that we've had that growth. And we believe that the major impact was it being back to free under the seamless summer option, but also because school was open and there was more children in school and it was convenient for them to eat. So out of the total amount of meals that we're doing, 80% of those are coming straight from the in-school learning students that are consuming meals on site. And we do provide meals for those students Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, with Wednesday being a curbside option as well. And we provide breakfast and lunch, and it is free through December. But the USDA did say if funds run out before December 31st, we would go back to the National School Lunch Program, where we would claim students based on their eligibility. Snack currently is also free for students who are enrolled in eligible programs under the National School Lunch Program. And dinner and supper is free for those sites that have been approved and qualify under the CYFD requirements. So we were able to start that back up when the hybrid model began. And hot meals, as we stated before, those are offered for the in-site learning. And we are also currently servicing the special needs program out of the middle schools and the high schools. And we serve about 35 breakfasts, 35 lunches to those students as well. And out of those 5 curbside locations now, 2 of them, Lincoln Middle School and Mountain View Middle School, start at 10:30, and we serve it for an hour. Then the other 2 middle schools, Rancho Middle School and Eagle Ridge Middle School, they begin at 11:30 to 12:30. So we have that hour window where parents can come and pick up breakfast and lunch for and they just let us know how many students they're picking up, or children, because it's free for children ages 1 through 18. And they can go to any site. It doesn't have to be their home school. And then Cleveland is intentionally open a little later from 12 to 1 in case any of those sites do happen to run out. We send them over to Cleveland, or if that's just a better time for parents. And we follow the same menu as we do for the in-site, the only difference being that we only offer the one entree for those curbside meals. So everything else, all the side items, all the fresh fruits and vegetables are all offered to the students that are picking up curbside as well. And we are offering them cold because for food safety and better temperature control, we are able to give them a safer meal that way. That way they can just go home and either cook it or reheat it or whatever the item might be. We are also servicing out of Enchanted Mesa Daycare. We do about 32 breakfasts, 32 lunch, and 32 snacks every day for the little ones. And Shining Star Preschool, since they began during the hybrid model, we are also feeding them. It's about 200 breakfasts for the AM children that go Monday and Tuesday, and about 200 lunches for the PM students that go Thursday and Friday. For the students that are in school and are eating meals there in the cafeteria, there is enter and exit signs posted along the cafeterias as it is throughout the school. There's social distancing floor stickers and signage of how to keep the 6 feet apart. There's sneeze guards in place for the servers and for the cashier. Currently, we're not using our point of sale system. So it's the cashiers, or the managers are able to cashier and help direct the students. And the staff are required to wear masks just like everyone else. We do a daily staff screening. They get their temperature taken. They answer a set of questions to ensure that we're we're sending people home if they feel any symptoms, or allowing them to call in if they are. About 80 students fit in the cafeteria and the gym the way that it is set up. Each bench seats 2 children, and facilities made the barriers so where we separate each classroom. And it depends on the school, of course, but most cafeterias fit about 80 students. And the serving times vary by site as well. And there's cleaning and disinfection taking place in between each classroom. The meal service part, so we're only serving currently on disposable trays that the children could throw away after consumption. And no a la carte meals or items are being offered other than milk, just to have the line of service a little faster. There's also no offering bars, no self-service water stations, no share box, no self-service condiment stations, just to avoid those points of contact. Everything is served from the back of the serving line. And there's 2 hot meal choices. We're on a 5-week national cycle that we are following and giving those children two choices a day. And then there's like I said earlier, those options are also offered at curbside, with the entree just being the one option. And menu copies are available online. We also sent them out. They're posted at school. We sent them out to all staff at the sites. We are looking at maybe printing some for parent distribution. I know last time we had said it was going to be electronic only, but it might be helpful for a parent to have a monthly menu. So now some of the challenges and improvements that we have encountered during this whole COVID situation, we opened up Joe Harris, and so we had to order all the equipment, all the supplies in order to feed the students out of that school. Mesa Cold Storage, where we would store our commodity foods, closed down, so we had to switch everything over to Flagship Foods, and they're local. They distribute the 505 green chilies, so they've been very helpful in transitioning our inventory over to their storage locations. We also had to get a replacement vehicle for the vandalized refrigerated truck that we have. They actually stole the catalytic converter, so we had to get a replacement because that's the vehicle that we were using to transport all the curbside meals. So that was a bit of a challenge. And we're managing our labor and to service all of our open sites. We started off with being about 16 employees working on just the curbside locations. Now that we've opened up the 11 elementaries, we have about 52 employees, which still allows us to have like about 40% of our staff that is still on furlough. And because of the minimum wage increase, we have front-loaded wage increases for some of our employees that would be affected. We wanted to make sure that they're also living above the minimum wage now that it's going to increase to January. So we have front-loaded it now to the beginning of the school year so they can see that benefit now. And one of the things that was brought to our attention now that the hybrid model started, that there's a lot of small children that were having a hard time opening up the pre-wrapped items. So what we were thinking, instead of because what they were trying to do is open it up with their teeth, and after they had failed, then they'd ask the teacher for help. So in order to eliminate some of that contact challenge, we're just going to have our staff open it up for them as they place it on their tray. That way it could help those children not struggle so much, and the teachers eliminate the contact that they have to have with the children in the lunchroom. And one of the biggest challenge is just the program changes overall, going from the free seamless summer option where everybody gets free meal to having to switch to the national school lunch program, parents having to give their students names and IDs, and now going back to it being free. When things have been the same, we've seen our meals pretty much stay the same, but when stuff starts changing, parents get out of the know of knowing what to do or where to go. That's where we kind of see a little bit of adjustments on the meal count. So some things that we've thought about doing is increasing the communication through Facebook or doing like the emails, the distributions like that. Last Wednesday, actually, we did a distribution on the meals being free for all children ages 1 through 18. We saw an increase by 300 meals. So we expect that more parents are going to be coming more often. And then something that we actually heard from the PED on Thursday, I believe it was, we can actually start doing weekend meals. So that might encourage parents to come and pick up. So we'll be providing Saturday and Sunday meals during meal pickup on Fridays. So those will be something that is offered to those families as well. a challenge that we're coming now that we're going to have in service and fall break. We want to make sure that the children are still fed. So our plan is to distribute meals on Thursday for those 4 days. And same thing for October 29th, when the elementaries are on conference or parent-teacher conference. We'll still do curbside meal pickups and also offer for the 4 days. And another thing that we're working on is we're collaborating with the leadership at Rancho High School and Cleveland High School to provide breakfast and lunch for the students that are going to take the PSATs and SATs. So for now, we know that there's about 65 classrooms for Cleveland that we'll have to deliver meals to. Right now, Rancho High School hasn't quite given us an amount yet, but we'll be working with them to provide meals for those students. And we also want to encourage parents to fill out the free and reduced meal application, because as soon as those funds may run out or December hits, we're going to have to go back to doing the National School Lunch Program, where students are having to pay if they don't qualify for that. So we want to make sure that there's no lapse in their eligibility, because last year's application expired on the 18th of September. And Ginger, our program specialist, will be reaching out to those families that have an expired application, making sure that they fill that out. So like I said, that there's not a lapse in their eligibility and that the students are able to receive that benefit. So that is all we have for an update. If you have any questions for myself or Arlene, I'm more than willing to be open to that.
Okay, thank you so much for that very thorough report. Before we run over to the board, Dr. Cleveland, did you want to add anything?
I would just agree. It was a very comprehensive report. Thank you so much for putting that together. You know, as we have dealt with not only feeding in the cafeteria, but curbside, but doing it all at the same time, is really a very complex process. When you're doing just curbside, that's challenging enough, and when you're doing it just inside, but the combination of the two at the same time really presented a lot of challenges, and Sodexo really stepped up and has made that work. So I just want to thank them for their hard work, and for it just seems like in so many other areas, there's one more challenge, like the barriers and the lines for maintaining as minimal contact before it was no charge for the students. But I want to express our thanks for your hard work in really difficult times, and keeping the focus continually on how do we get every child fed that needs to be fed. And so with that, that's all I had to say, but just thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, Dr. Cleveland. Arlene, was there anything else you wanted to add before I have the board ask questions?
Thank you, President Galbraith. I just want to also say, as Dr. Cleveland did, thank you to Sodexo. They do a wonderful job. And with all of the many changes, you know, from one day to the next, they are always willing to do whatever it takes to feed the children of Rio Rancho, which is the most important thing. And I also want to thank our communications department for helping us make those changes and get that information out. It's, of course, as you've heard, it's ongoing. It changes from one week to the next. And I want to thank all the parents as well for being understanding and patient. All of these changes are, of course, as they know, everyone knows it's beyond our control, and we are just doing our best to inform everyone and making sure that we can get all the children fed.
Thank you, Arlene. Okay, we'll go to questions. Noreen Scott, do you have any questions or comments?
I would just like to say thank you. You know, as an average citizen in the community, I had no idea of the volume of meals that Sodexo was putting out, and it's really impressive. And I want to thank your staff so much for working in the heat all summer, making sure that our children had food. And I don't think there's anything more important right now than making sure that we have the well-being of our children, number one. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Secretary Scott. Jeffrey Morgan.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Noreen said. Thank you so much for the work that you do. And thank you for the presentation, I should say. Very good information. But I just do want to ask one question. Did I hear you say a sneezing station?
No, it's a sneeze guard. So it's like a plastic barrier that is between the child and the employee.
Oh,
That's what
okay,
that's what we call them.
Okay, I said I've never heard of that before. I said I better ask because I don't want to assume, But thank you again. Appreciate you.
All right, thank you. He's envisioning just like this place where people go to. All right, thank you, Vice President Morgan. Catherine Cullen.
No, thank you. No questions. Thank you for the report.
Thank you, Catherine. And Board Member Coleman.
Yes, so I had a question. The students that are online, 100%, they are still eligible for the meals, correct?
Yes, they are. So right now, since it's free for the community, actually anybody that comes down would be eligible. But if it ever switches to the National School Lunch Program, they would continue to be eligible because they are an enrolled student with Rio Rancho Public Schools.
Okay, and are you finding that that message is being received by those families?
I would say towards the beginning they weren't, but now that we sent that email out on Wednesday, it was 300 meals that increased in one day. So I'm assuming that now we're able to get that word out, and just continuing sending that out to the parents. I think that's going to help a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for what you do. And the relationship with Sodexo has always been just a great one. And so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, as a parent, so I have 4 kids in the district. I've been seeing a lot of communication come through and I feel like it's getting out there. So hopefully we can continue to get it out there to everyone. But it seems to be really good. One last comment. I was talking to someone in the community the other day, and that was the thing she commented on. She said, "Oh, the free lunches are just heaven sent." And I think that we have so many struggles right now in our community that it's one less thing for people to have to worry about. So thank you, and thank you to your staff for everything that you guys are doing. And tell Mark we missed him. So
I will.
You did a great job. All right, thank you so much. Okay. Our third report is on Equity Council's culturally relevant curriculum. And this will be given by Suzanne Nguyen. She's our Executive Director of Federal, Bilingual, and Native American Programs. Also, Luana Coleman, our Executive Director of Secondary Curriculum and Instruction. That's a lot to put out. I just
Well done. Thank you. And good evening, President Galbraith, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. We're happy to be able to share with you tonight an overview of the work that we have done thus far and continue to work on around our Equity Council and culturally and linguistically responsive instruction. Next slide, please. Just to begin by providing a little bit of context, as you are all aware of, the racial and ethnic demographics within our district. The majority of our students do identify as Hispanic, with the second most common race or ethnicity being Caucasian, but you do see good representation across the board here. Next slide. Something that you may not have been aware of is the diversity in languages represented within our community. Here we do have 24 languages listed, but that does include others. So I would say it is 24 plus languages just within our community of languages spoken at home. Next slide, please. Next, I hand it over to my dear colleague, Luana Coleman, who is one of our co-coordinators of our District Equity Council.
Good evening, Madam Galbraith, members of the board, and Dr. Cleveland. Thank you, and thanks, Suzanne. Last fall, we received a letter from the Public Ed Department stating that all school districts were required to create an equity council. And they outlined the process through which we would go through and how many members we should have on it. And when we saw this, we got all fired up because it fit just in line with the work we had already been doing around the each and every idea, culturally and linguistically relevant instruction. So it fit like a hand in a glove. Next slide. We saw the council as being a vehicle really for voice, and then in a structured place. So we have opportunities for our community and parents and family members to provide input, but we didn't have anything that was really structured like a council that had regular meetings, that could have dialogue on how students are doing, to look at our diverse data, to answer questions about the system. As you are all well aware, there's lots of things going on in our district that often are not communicated well enough throughout the entire community. And so it was nice to see a question come up and we can say, this is what we're doing, or this is where we need to go. It's a great place to exchange ideas and answer questions. And then finally, we look forward to the time when the Equity Council can meet with you and make recommendations regarding student supports and access to every opportunity that we want all of our students to have. Next slide. The process for the Equity Council. In December, Suzanne worked really hard to create a website and to create an application process. And we had a rubric that was involved in the application process. And on our application, we asked for things like previous experience in this kind of work, why people were interested in it, any expertise that they might bring to our group. And the applications came rolling in. We weren't sure what to expect, and we had well over 50 applicants for the Equity Council. We then brought the council in January to a full day. Those seemed like days long ago when we could meet in the training center and have our full day meetings, and with an orientation for our council. And then we had 3 2-hour follow-up meetings, 1 live and 2 have been virtual. And the most kind of overarching all of the work we've done so far has been coming up with this idea of a common definition of equity. It's interesting because I think we all think we know what that means, but can we share a definition that we can all hold to? Next slide. We have 14 Equity Council members, and they are all so committed to this work that it inspires me every time I'm with them. And we have 5 district co-coordinators. So we've got various departments. Suzanne's department, Jerry Reeder, Student Services, Tana Burgos, and Elementary CNI all work together to drive this work. And our 14 Equity Council members are we have a student, we have 2 teachers, parents and community members. All of the subgroups outlined in the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit are represented. And the next slide shows the diversity of the group. Oh, no, the next slide shows the names of the group. So you can back up, Jane, and or whoever's running. Yeah. So this is our Equity Councils. You may know some of these wonderful, committed participants, not having missed 1 meeting so far. And we're even getting emails saying, when's the next meeting? So there's some pressure there for our continued work. The next slide. Here's where you see the diversity of membership. So as you can tell, you add all these up and it's way more than 14. So most of our participants represent more than 1 group, which was something we were looking for and happy to see this happen. I'll have to say our second meeting, so we had 2 full meetings, our in-person meetings, and then 2 virtual meetings. Our last meeting on June 11th was virtual. And we started the meeting, you may recall, June was sort of a rough month for COVID. It was a rough couple of months for our nation. And we started the meeting just asking for a check-in. And I still hold that time that we were with these people so closely because there was so much vulnerability. And I think by the time the 3rd person was checking in with where they were, most of us were in tears. And so while we hadn't spent a lot of time together, there was a commitment to these ideals of equity and to making the district the best district it can be. And it, as I said, truly inspiring. Next slide. The times we met, we've been trying to build context for the work. So, you say you're an equity council, or I believe in equity. What does that really mean? And one of the first activities we did is we had these 4 quotes made into posters, and we put them in the 4 corners. This is a good Avid strategy. And ask people to look at the quotes and choose one that really resonates with them and go to that corner. And then they have a nice conversation about why they chose that corner. And then each group can report out what they felt was most important about the quote. So that was a fun and also important activity to bring context. We had a presentation on cultural identity. Jerry did a presentation for us on people first language. And then we have been rounding out that idea of shared beliefs and what we stand for and what we hope to see as a council. And then the next slide. We worked on our definition quite a bit. There were several iterations of this work, and it was interesting how doing it multiple times over periods of time, you begin to see certain words bubble up and things that become really important. And in our work, I'll be quiet and let you read this definition, and then I'll tell you how we got there. So a couple of things that had to be in this definition. First of all, we couldn't get it with one sentence, which we know that's what we should have had, but we tried. The notion of an intentional process was something very important to the group, and that it's not something that's willy-nilly or just sort of happens on its own, but it is an intentional process that we work towards, and that the environments and opportunities are fostered. So there's opportunities was a word that kept showing up. We had to have that in our definition. And that we're fostering, so that we're doing something. So it's not that just an opportunity to exist, but what do you do to grow that and to help build it up? And we also, you see individual and group needs. We saw the importance of both. So there may be groups of students, groups of community members in our community, as well as individuals that need that support. And then finally, access to resources. So it wasn't that you just have opportunities. This was an interesting discussion. So it's not that you just have an opportunity, but you have to have access to resources to make that happen. And so all of this had to come together into something that was coherent, which I think it is, and important to this group. We love this image. We've been using this. Jerry has used it for a long time, but we love this image that you see the kids on the right don't have access. They don't have access to the resources to provide that equitable access to watching the game. And that's ultimately our goal. And I think that's my last slide, and I'll turn it back to Suzanne, who will share CLRI.
Thank you very much, Luana. So in our district, we've been engaged in a lot of work around CLRI, I would say for about 4 years, with really deep focus and intention around making sure that we as a system have a deep common understanding of what CLRI is, so that it is truly reflected in our practices across the school system. And there's so much research out there that shows how CLRI is so deeply ingrained in brain development and is essential to human growth. We are social, complex beings, and in order to build meaningful relationships that will then open each of us up to learning beings of any age, from our youngest learners to any age, we need to be able to have that deep understanding of who we are as a person with our own identity, which includes who we are culturally and linguistically. Next slide, please. A really strong thought partner and leader across the nation, actually, that we've partnered with is Dr. Shiraki Holly. And this is how Dr. Holly defines what CLRI is. So it's the validation and affirmation of the home or indigenous culture and home language for the purposes of building and bridging the student to success in the culture of academia and mainstream society. So it is really about recognizing the individuality within each of us and helping ourselves and our students be able to shift behaviors depending on the context or situation that we're in without losing sight of who we are as an individual. Next slide, please. Like I said before, we've been engaged in this work with great intention for quite a while. We have this timeline, I guess, of different activities we've done organized into 3 categories of what we've done with the state through the PED Language and Culture Bureau, what we've done within our district, and what has happened at the school level. So through the PED, beginning in school year 2018-19, there was an application process that we applied for, and we were one of 5 school districts selected to be part of the CLRI pilot cohort. And with that, there were 3 pathways, and this was all state funded. So pathway 1 was for administrators to be trained with Dr. Holly around CLRI. Pathway 2 included staff members or teachers from the administrator campuses to be trained deeply to build out that network of understanding at each of the locations around CLRI. And pathway 3 is what we were in the middle of when the pandemic hit. And that included site-specific coaching through Dr. Shiraki Holly's office to directly impact practices within the classroom. And then district-based, we have engaged in book studies, so not just through Dr. Holly's work, but also from Zaretta Hammond, who wrote a book called Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. So engaging in book studies around her book and other authors, providing an overview for our entire district leadership team. We have also built in threads of CLRI through all of our professional learning in-service days for our district, pre-K through 12, for teachers to be able to select from a menu board different topics that all relate around this idea. And we also brought in a really engaging, knowledgeable presenter to provide Native American cultural competency for our district leadership team. And like Lawana had mentioned earlier with our work around Equity Council, we've been really purposeful in integrating this work across several departments, which crosses curriculum and instruction as well as operational. So seeing that multi-department collaboration in our collective efforts has been really powerful. And lastly, campus-based efforts. So I list here just categories or numbers of schools at each level participating in this work. So we have 6 elementary, 2 middle, 2 high. This was as of last year. Cuesta del Sol has implemented a staff-wide training for their whole school in 2016. Stapleton beginning in 2019, and Rio Rancho High School this year. So they have a full half-day session dedicated to CLRI, which will be their 3rd already for this year. And that session is upcoming on our Thursday in-service day. Next slide, please. That concludes our overview of the Equity Council and CLRI work that we've completed so far. And like I said before, it continues. So we don't see an arrival at this destination. It will be a continuous journey that we go on together. Any questions that Lawana and I can answer?
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation. First, we'll go to Dr. Cleveland and see if she wants to add anything.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to step away for just a moment for a call. I really want to stress our commitment to this effort. Excuse me. And I think the word I heard so many times was purposeful and consistent. And so that the effort of saying this is just not just saying it's important, but all the hard work. And I give so much credit to Suzanne and to Luana, Jerry in the area of special services, who just, it's just not the words, it's the actions, and they work really hard. And we've had some really good results over the last several years. And I just want to share just a couple of them with you just really quickly. But for example, and this is over our last 5 years, our and graduation rates or percentages, our African American community has gone from 81% to 92%. Our Hispanic community has gone from 79.3 to 87.1. Our Asian, and again, sometimes you have to be real careful because in some of these very small groups, they can be skewed from year to year just because the size is small. But our Asian community, it's 88% to 100%. Our American Indian, our Native Americans have gone from 78.8 to 92%. And you look at that in comparison to, for example, to our state percentages. For example, in Native American, the state percentage is 69.6%. And so it doesn't come about without tremendous hard work and dedication, or people actually really working on this issue of equity. The other comment that I would make is a lot of people were really concerned about the council and wanting to be sure that the council's role was very clearly defined. And I think over time that's evolved. You know, we hear so much, I'm really kind of tired of work in progress. Seems like our whole lives are work in progress right now. But it is, but the council, like everything else, has kind of evolved over time. And I think it is working very well. And an opportunity to address them one evening. I thought they were very thoughtful. They asked very good questions. They wanted to know a lot about Yeltsin Martinez and what they had heard about it. So I think it is a good group. And I think they know that their role is to support their students and to make recommendations to the district and to the board. And so, a lot of folks maybe have not had, at least I've heard, maybe not had as good results with their equity council as we have. But I think that is due very much to the leadership and to the hard work that, as I said, Suzanne, Luana, Jerry, and others have put in to make it worthwhile. And if people are calling you for a meeting in this day and time, you know you're doing something right. So the fact that we have people calling, wanting to meet, I think just reemphasizes that they see the value and the importance of the council. And my last comment is, going back to Baldrige and the comment that was made earlier in the presentation, having intentionality and having a structure for people to be heard is you're much more likely to hear from them than you just hope it's going to happen, even if you're very open to it happening. And so it provides a structure for people to be heard and a structure for people to hear what we're doing and a structure to understand how the system works so they can be part of that system. And I think it's been successful at all those levels. So again, thank you for your presentation. And but maybe more importantly, thank you for the hard work that has been able to produce some really very good, solid results in our district.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland, for that additional information and comments. Very helpful. We'll start with our board. How about Wynn Coleman? Would you like to give any comments or questions?
I do have a question, but I just want to thank both Luana and Suzanne for just being such an integral part of this. It's just, it's wonderful to see. Can you speak to, when it comes to the students with disabilities, understanding kind of that umbrella, what that covers, can you maybe speak to what discussion there might be when you're meeting when it comes to students that maybe would fall a little bit out of that maybe might have, my passion is mental health and kind of how mental health is being addressed in this equity group. And so if you could speak a little bit about kind of what's happened within the group in regard to that area.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Coleman. That's part of the beauty of the way that we designed our coordinating teams. So it's Luana and I, of course, and Jerry, but also Tana Burgos, who's Executive Director of Student Services, and formerly Elizabeth, but now Joy Morales, who's Executive Director of Elementary CNI. And so that was really purposeful in designing that team because there's so much crossover in the way that we support all of our students. So that has been a big part of the context building for our equity council, is understanding what diversity really means, and how even though we each may represent one or more of the subgroups that we had outlined in a previous slide, that many of our students might shift from one program qualification to another, and it might present itself very differently. I remember one conversation in particular where someone made a comment that maybe we should have somebody with an exceptionality or a disability here in the community, but we do. It just doesn't present itself the way that you might assume. It might not be a physical impairment. Who knows what it might be? So a lot of our conversation and context building and relationship building within the Equity Council has been just that, understanding what the different needs are represented within our community.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Could I add one thing just very quickly? I think one of the issues many years ago was concerns that there was over-identification in a variety of different groups, and that might have been over-identification, might have been mistakes that were made because of a lack of understanding and awareness of cultural differences. We've come a really long way in making sure that is not the case. And but I do want you to know that Jerry definitely does have, in addition to this particular group, he does have his own organizations that he meets with parents to also reinforce our support for all children.
Okay, thank you. Go to Jeffrey Morgan.
No questions. Just want to say thanks. Thanks, you guys, for your work that you do. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And Catherine Cullen. Okay.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. And Noreen Scott.
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Scott. I just too want to thank you for this report. As a new school board member, I haven't had a chance to hear a lot about this, and so it was really nice to hear about and what's happening in our district. I wrote down from your definition, which Suzanne, I think it was, I can't remember which one of you was presenting at the time, but that I think it actually was Luana, that intentional process. And when you said that, that was really important to me, that, everything we do, I feel like needs to be intentional. And so I really liked that in your definition, that how important that was to you. So thank you for your presentation tonight. We really appreciate it. And I hope to continue to see really just good things that come from this. So thank you so much. Any additional comments from you two before we let you? Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Really much appreciated. Okay. Now to our business, and we'll start with business item A, and to consider approval of the September 14th, 2020 unapproved board minutes. Are there any questions or changes that need to take place on those board minutes? Okay.
This is Secretary Scott. I move for approval of the board minutes of September 14th.
This is board member Jeff Morgan. I second.
Okay. We have a motion by Secretary Scott and a second by Vice President Morgan. Jane, can you take a roll call vote for us?
Yes, I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman,
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Item B, to consider the approval of the September 23rd, 2020 unapproved board minutes. Any changes that need to take place on those minutes? Okay.
This is Secretary Scott. I move approval of the September 23rd, 2020 board minutes.
This is Board Member Jeff Morgan. I second.
Thank you. Jane, can you take a roll call vote for us?
Yes, I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman,
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0 on that one. And so we'll now discuss the first reading of the revisions to Board Policy 750, COVID-19 pandemic. Mike Chavez, our Executive Director of Human Resources, is here to present.
Good evening. Good evening, President Galbraith, Dr. Cleveland, members of the board. Dr. Cleveland mentioned earlier this evening about surveillance testing. As this is a fairly significant portion of the toolkit that was presented by the New Mexico PED and has a wide-reaching impact on the entire staff for the school district, we decided that it was important to include one more item in Board Policy 750, which we had finished presenting to you last time, and which was approved by the board. So we're here to make a small addendum. Jane, would you be able to make that a little bit larger? Okay. So much of this language comes directly from the toolkit. And as it states, as a condition for opening the schools in a hybrid model, PED has established a requirement that schools implement a COVID-19 surveillance testing process to detect outbreaks as early as possible by screening asymptomatic staff and contractors. PED has implemented a weekly 5% surveillance testing requirement for faculty and staff who are physically working at schools. District staff and contractors should perform regular work at multiple buildings, and central office staff will go to any school buildings. The intent of the 5% surveillance testing requirement is that all affected staff will be tested over the course of the year. The superintendent shall develop processes and procedures that are designed to implement and ensure that all district employees adhere to this PED requirement. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Dr. Cleveland, were you wanting to add anything as we go to questions on this?
No, I think Mike covered it very well. Again, just stress that this is a requirement for PED in the latest toolkit, and Lauren and Mike have put this together for the board to add to the policy. And again, it falls under the emergency policy for COVID-19.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cleveland. We'll go for questions from the board. We'll start with Wynn Coleman. You're on the top of my screen.
No, I don't have any questions, but thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Cullen.
No, thank you.
Jeffrey Morgan.
No questions, thank you.
Noreen Scott.
No questions, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's our first reading. So thank you, Mike. I don't have any questions either on this. I mean, it's one of those things that we just kind of have to do and put in there. So I appreciate you taking the time to revise that policy. And thank you for presenting it. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, item D has been taken out for this meeting tonight. So we'll move on to item E to consider the approval of the resolution small group instructions for grades 6 through 12, and Dr. Visu Cleveland will be our presenter.
Okay, I'm not going to rehash this. I covered most of this in my introductory remarks. So just to make it very short, what we are asking is for the state to reconsider and allow us to bring back some of our highest need at-risk children who are not special education. Special education is covered under another option from the public ed department. So it's looking at children who do not necessarily have a disability, but children who have other factors that make them at risk. For example, you might have an English language learner, and that child may be struggling a lot to do the online curriculum when they're very limited in their ability to speak English. That would be one example of an at-risk child. There are also some children who have very difficult time. They're having very difficult time attending at all to the online programs, either at Google Classroom or Edgenuity at the high school level. So we'd be looking for those students that would be highest need and would bring them back under the very same requirements, restrictions, socially distanced, small groups, all of the things that apply to our children with disabilities, but would also allow us to provide those same services to children who are not special education, but also at risk for other reasons. And so this is to ask the state to reconsider and allow us to bring these students back, grades 6 through 12.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cleveland. We'll go for questions. I know we've discussed this. We'll start with Wynn Coleman.
No questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Noreen Scott.
No questions.
Okay. Jeffrey Morgan.
No questions.
Yeah, and Catherine Cullen.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So I move to approve the resolution of small group instructions for grades 6 through 12.
No, this is Board Member Coleman. I second.
Thank you. Jane, can you take a roll call vote for us on this?
Sure. Vice President Morgan?
Yes.
Secretary Scott?
Yes.
Board Member Cullen?
Yes.
Board Member Coleman?
Yes.
President Galbraith?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, and our last item is to consider, well, we're not going to consider the approval. This is changed now to a first reading. So we'll take a look at policy 407, transfer of high school credits, late enrollment, and withdrawal. And Carl Leppelman, our Chief Academic Officer, will present this to us.
Good evening. President Galbraith, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. As you mentioned earlier, President Galbraith, we did look at this about 6 months ago, and a lot's happened since then. If you think back, it's an amazing the changes we've seen as a nation, as a state. But at the time, our goal was to improve or increase the number of students who were taking dual credit courses, leading to career technical education pathways, and that has been a goal of yourself as well as Member Coleman and others on the board. So this really change that we're looking at is something we've been working on for quite a while. And I think the first change is very simple, so I don't think I'll walk through the entire thing, but some of it's just minor changes in terms of final versus end of course. But I did ask Jane to maybe scroll down to the major changes within the curriculum, within the policy, which then changes curriculum. And I think that's right there. Thank you so much, Jane. What we've tried to do here, and we met in this process, we've met with principals, teachers, instructional leaders, curriculum instruction staff, David Latham, looking at Renee Saucedo, we really wanted to expand the opportunities for students and access. And so we've removed a limit of 2 elective credits. The main reason for that is for the purpose of students who are in a cohort or leading towards some type of certification may need to have up to 15 to 30 credits by the time they're a senior. So we definitely wanted to make sure they had access to that. The other part of it that's key is that it has to be, must be pre-approved by the counselor. And the purpose for that is for the next step planning, to make sure that all students it leads to something that would be a career after high school. The credits, again, as we looked at this policy, would count as both core or an elective credit as outlined in our program of studies and course codes. And so we sat down last spring actually looking at that and have made those changes. The dual credit courses must be part of a career pathway and lead to college or career workplace readiness and be approved as part of the student's next step planning. Quality college and career guidance will be provided by the student's counselor. And we have a remarkable group of counselors, as you know, and I think they're critical to the success of this, the actually implementation of this policy. There is one other, Jane, if you go ahead and scroll down, there's one other minor change from the last time we looked at it. And this is the changes in our state assessment system to some degree, but basically as students enroll, they will have a choice to still have a district end of course or a final examination. And these are students that come into Rancho Public Schools, and we need to have some way to determine if those students have met the requirements of that course in terms of late enrollment. So I think that's the main changes. Jane, if you scroll down one more page, there is one more. Okay, so that's procedural, and it would be transmitted to the school to which the student transfers. Is the only change in that paragraph. Jane, I think is that the last page of the policy? Okay. Thank you. So I stand for questions. Or skip
Thank you. So I had, I love this, by the way. I think these are great changes, and I'm really excited for them to be implemented in the district. But one kind of quick thing, and poor Carl's probably getting sick of hearing from me on this one. One other thing that I would hope to have, and probably open for discussion on this, it's generally scroll up to the top page to a right, go up. Oh, is it this one? Maybe it isn't B. Oh, it's an A. Okay, so here in A, the only change that I would love to get in here too is that right now students may earn 1 math high school credit, and this is from middle school, the middle schoolers, and a half health high school credit from Rancho Public Schools, middle schools. And there are some kids in our district who are taking an additional high school course when they are in middle school. So some of those kids, they'll end up, they're advanced, and so they'll take algebra in 7th grade, and then they'll end up taking geometry in 8th grade, and they will take the finals just as the high school students are, and do the same work that the high school students are doing. And so the only change I would like to see in here is just to have, and I don't think it has to go in as a math credit, but that they would receive an elective credit or some sort of credit for the hard work that they're doing, especially since they're doing the same work as our high school students are doing in those classes. Carl, is that possible? Have you had a chance to talk to anyone about that?
No, and I think I'm glad it is the first reading. I think it'd be a great opportunity for us to reconvene and look at that with the administration as well as teachers. I think the only thing that the change would be when we set standards for graduation program studies since the inception of the district, we've only accepted high school credit if they took that course during their 8th grade year in middle school. So I think that would be the big significant change of offering a credit, whether it's core or elective. The other thing I would like to do is really work at looking at regulation to make sure there's no regulation at the state level that might impact that. So we could go back and look at the language and come back and see if that's possible, and then report back to you as a board.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to our board now for any additional comments or recommendations, and then we'll start with Noreen Scott.
I have none. I was very interested, though, in your question, because I think we want to reward children for working hard in middle school, who are motivated to get done quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Secretary Scott. Anything else that you wanted to add? I'm good. Okay. Jeffrey Morgan?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Catherine Cohen?
No questions, but I do want to say that, with the dual credits, that's such an important piece, being able to count it now as a core instead of the electives. I know that was something that was challenging when we first started this years ago of, early college. And so this is, an exciting change in eliminating those 2 elective credits as well, because, we're seeing high competition through high schools throughout the state of, some of them getting their associates before they even get out of high school. So I think this is certainly a way to broaden this and be able to count them as their core, since that was a challenge that we had. Thank you.
Thank you. And Wynn Coleman?
No questions, but thank you for the presentation.
And Dr. Cleveland, did you want to add anything?
No, I think Carl did a good job. We'll get that additional information and get that input back for you for the next meeting.
Okay, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much, Carl. I really appreciate it. And once again, I think this is a great move ahead for our district. I think anything we can do to keep our students wanting to be in our Rancho Public Schools is a good thing. And I think this is a way to do that for a lot of our students. So thank you for taking the time.
Students, that ties well with the Equity Council, because it does open up doors for kids who have not had opportunities in the past. So I think that's a very good thing.
Yes, you're right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And so, board, is there anything else that I've missed tonight, or? Okay. All right. And Dr. Cleveland, is there anything else before I go into the advanced planning?
No, I don't think so. Just sorry for the scratchy throat tonight. It sounds terrible. It's awful to have to listen to me, but thank you all.
I think there was something in the air. I was drinking my water as well. So, all right. Thank you so much. So for our advanced planning, we have October 7th and 8th is our fall in-service. October 9th is fall break. October 12th, 4:30 p.m., there will be a finance committee meeting, which will be virtual. October 12th, 5:30 p.m. will be a regular board meeting, virtual. October 14th, 40th day. Does someone want to explain to me what 40th day actually means? And does anyone know? I should know this. I see faces and I feel.
I'm trying to get on here. 40th day is one of the days we calculate funding, and it's an extremely important day for our district. And that those numbers help determine what our financial situation will look like next year.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the explanation. And then October 14th also is a New Mexico, NMSBA region meeting, virtual fall region meeting. And October 26th at 5:30 will be another regular board meeting, which will also be virtual. And this meeting for tonight is adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.